Hmm. All righty then. So it's in this in this non-linear fashion, in this non-linear fashion of exploration, which can have its start in a circle of cycles. Actually, a circling circuit of cycles. Actually, a circus in circuits, rings three perhaps, of of cyclical beginnings and endings. And so when I say nonlinear, um, this can have a lot of different meanings, especially in current usage, in terms of literary style or any other kind of style, in terms of styles of thought. But nonlinear thinking, in the way that I would like to conceptualize a bit on, is um, cyclical kind of thinking, so that meaning accrues and builds up and is discovered in these kind of like cycles of metaphorical thought. And so the thought is kind of structured in this way that the form of it emerges in the same way that whirlpools, spirals emerge from your paddle as you paddle your canoe upon the face of the deep. So it's like this. And from this, then we can build up this kind of, we need to educate our sense of recurrence, in inner space, and how to recognize the different scales, you might say, which is maybe another way of saying cycles. When you stack them up in a vertical way, it could mean this. Um, but reading comprehension, to take it a step farther, you know, would also be kind of the art of becoming awareness of the different styles of awareness that are expressed in thinking, different styles of awareness that are expressed in thinking, different styles of thinking that are expressed through awareness. See, it's that kind of talk. That's philosophical talk, and that's one side, one pole, because we can also consider the concept of polarity. That's one pole of what we'll be approaching philosophical speech about concepts, speech about ideas. But there is something that energizes or makes visible to the intuition and the imagination as well in the other style of speech that is not philosophical, at least in contrast, but actual like picture language, vision speak, right? The hieroglyphics of the recurrences, the concepts, and the themes that can be expressed in poetic language. Really, this is just a way of describing poetic language. And that's a good, kind of theme to explore. So, speaking of poetic language, I'd like to start off at the beginning of this with a poem from Gary Snyder, the poet that many have heard of, very well known. And we can look at the meaning of some of this. This is an old friend of Gary Snyder who has appeared in earlier poems of Gary Snyder's and is in part of the story of Gary Snyder, a friend of his that they bonded through their shared interest in poetry, from their college days, from their student days. And so here's a poem. So this is the familiar name that will be mentioned anyway. This is a poem by Gary Snyder. It is called For From Lou. It is from the book Axe Handles by Gary Snyder. Lou Welch just turned up one day, live as you and me. Damn, Lou, I said. You didn't shoot yourself after all. Yes, I did, he said. And even then I felt the tingling down my back. Yes, you did too, I said. I can feel it now. Yeah, he said. There's a basic fear between your world and mine. I don't know why. What I came to say was, teach the children about the cycles, the life cycles, all the other cycles. That's what it's all about. And it's all forgot. So, Jack Spicer said it was okay for us poets on the West Coast to be interested in the poetry of messages. And so, isn't that a poetry of messages? So it's about the cycles, and it's all forgot, he says. All the cycles, the life cycles, teach the children about the cycles. So it's also, it relates to the element of actually morality. Morality in the terms of one's obligation to the human community as a comprehender of these essential thematic concepts. So steps are made in this direction as a way to appreciate this strange tale that I want to explore a little bit about, called The Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily, or also called The Tale of Tales. And it was written by Goethe. And it's unique in and of itself. It could be talked about in oh so many ways. I mean, it is what we might call, just on the surface, a literary fairy tale, slightly, mad in a certain sense, and slightly individually an outpouring or expression of an individual author's style. But enough of the tropes and themes and recurrences and cycles reappear in this self-conscious literary production. Enough tropes and themes and cycles reappear and manifest in this self-conscious literary creation, which are taken from the folk mind, the great universal store of all the imaginative symbols in the folklore and in the mythology and in the literature before it was self-consciously called literature. And so a literary folk tale is going to be, at its best, an excursion into what it would have been like to have been one of the ancient anonymous storytellers. The ancient anonymous storytellers who, there are those poets who say that the ancient anonymous storytellers are the ones who originally breathed forth through the fire of the furnace of their inward creative imagination, through the faculty of speech, the ones who breathed forth what became the foundation of all literary culture, of all mythic culture, in the old picture language, the vision language, the language on the other side of the pole from the philosophical language, the language of pictures, really the language of dramas and events and recurrences, the language that engages a particular faculty of attention on the part of the interested reader or the interested listener, which evokes the dimension of value by which beauty is appreciated. And if beauty is appreciated, then goodness will also be appreciated, provided that beauty educates its perception, which is a central kind of issue in the philosophy of one of the great thinkers that I want to mention, Schiller. Schiller was the playwright, but what I'm referring to is the prophetic aesthetic vision of the place of an aesthetic education in the overall education of the human being, expressing it in philosophical ideas that are clear as gold, that are full of light, and able to embody those ideas also in further forms. If the literary art is inspired in the way that I'm talking about, then it becomes possible for it to be carried on into these other forms of life, these other domains of expression, because the commonness will be found. What makes things, the bridge will be found. What makes things clear, and yet not accessible to a conventional sense, but clear as an open secret. These are the things that are part of what the ancient storytellers have given to the world, in the persona of which Goethe wrote this tale, The Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily. It's a tale within a tale within a tale, I have to say. It's a tale within a tale within a tale, because it is the tale which is itself, in its own meaning, the literary fairy tale, but beyond that, the archetypal ancient storyteller tale. It is that. And as those kind of stories often are, it is framed in a circular container, which is itself a story, you see. Goethe wrote a book about, it's called Conversations of German Immigrants. And the book is the frame story in which the tale, the green snake and the beautiful lily, appear. And the frame story is often, frame stories often and traditionally are, it consists of a group of people, a community of people who have been displaced in a traumatic way. It's a community of war refugees, you see, and they are a unique, particular kind, historically speaking, of a war refugee. But now they are going to be characterized and described in such a way that will make them literarily serviceable and philosophically serviceable and spiritually serviceable, not, though, to support or undermine any kind of like political theorem. You know, it's not that kind of writing, but it does involve the social themes. What I'm saying is this, actually, just to 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 tell you, it was the time that was a fracture, you know, in the body politic. It was the French Revolution. It was the French Revolutionary days, in which Goethe was living and crafting his thoughts and bringing his thoughts forth in these days. And I want to mention Goethe, and I also want to mention Schiller, because Schiller too. These were individuals who felt not only up close and personal, as they say, but in intimate ways the chaos of the fracturing and the ruptures of the French Revolution and all that it entailed, as well as, of course, the ideological and maybe prophetic and visionary kind of ideas that were expressed, you know, the ideals, you know, that drove the walls of the city to shake, you know, but also illustrated in the story of the French Revolution is the destruction wrought by the falling bricks of the previous structure, no matter how oppressive it may have been, and how indiscriminately those pieces fall, and where they land and where they bounce. It is impossible to limit them in any way once the destruction has been put in place. And then suddenly what impelled one to lift up one's hands and bring them down so hard upon a fragile structure such as that of a state, at that moment, what happens in the consequences cast the original impulse, you know, in a totally different light, you know. And so for every French Revolution and all, there's your Robespierre, there's your guillotine, you know, there's all of these things. There's your wicked rivalries worked out in these, you know, all these different kind of politicized conflicts that once they jump the fence, they're just all over the place. And so it was a group of aristocrats who had lost everything: their homes, their families, their friends, their everything in their original life was gone, and there's no hope of getting it back. And they were set out on the road to escape for their own safety, and they were traveling together. Now, and spiritually, I have to say, in this interpretation, when we call them aristocrats, it's what we're saying as we look at them as archetypal characters that are actually of a timeless world. We see that what is contained is kind of this like this original surplus, this original bounty, this original excess, which in the world of economics, of course, well, that's, you know, we know that is not a desirable state at all, that we know that. But in the spiritual realm, this bounty, this surplus, this excess is what gives the Quetzal bird its splendor, is what gives the bird of paradise, you know, its fire-fangled feathers dangle down, as Wallace Stevens put it, a poet whose theme was often this, you know, this very thing I'm trying to suggest, this surplus or surfeit of beauty or imaginative energy or spangle or whatever you want to call it. And it's contained in the minds of those who are now foot to foot with the dust of the road and with no place to go, and with minds full of worry and fear and anxiety and sorrow and regret and anguish and daily pressing needs of survival on top of that. And so, to lighten the load emotionally, they resort to an ancient human rhythmical kind of property, that of the speech, of the rhythms of the imagination. And so they mutually agree, this community, as part of the energy flowing through them that makes them a community, to agree to meet together in the evenings. And each one will be, and there's 7 of them, and each one is given to tell the tale that night. And then the next one will tell the tale the next night, and then the next night, and the next night, and on. This will lighten the load, upon them, the load, if you know what I mean. And so Goethe writes the story. This is the frame story, and then he writes these stories told by each of these aristocrats on the road. And some of them are ghost stories, and some of them are kind of like miracle stories, you see. They involve the awareness of a world whose signs do not reach us from the world of sense, whose signs do not reach us from the world of self-personality as created out of what the senses give. No, it's the awareness of a sense of reality which is not of those things, And as one spring day in about 1794, in Jena, Schiller and Goethe were conversing. And Goethe had been in Italy a few years before, and Goethe had felt his powers of observation kindled and inspired in all these ways that were both totally unusual and also very familiar to him. And this is important to understand sometimes. The strangest things are actually the most familiar. So that Goethe in a garden on Palermo in Italy a few years before, Goethe is saying this to Schiller, a few years, I actually saw it before my eyes. It was there. It was an actual flower, an actual plant growing in the garden. It was the archetypal plant, I tell you that it was. But then he went on to say, and he went on to describe the qualities of the archetypal plant in a way that the words had meaning that didn't seem to correspond as snugly and tightly and restrictedly to something seen through the eyes of someone looking at an actual real plant. It began to take on more and more of a conceptual picture of itself, and yet described in such a way that the structure is very real, but the awareness of that kind of reality is not of the conventional sense or the conventional instinct or the conventional reason in any way. And so Goethe was describing this as they were walking along, him and Schiller. And Goethe said, yes, that it is the archetypal plant, and it is this structure, and it has these qualities and these kind of its characteristics on its surface, and these characteristics within it, in the point where they reach their invisibility. And then suddenly Schiller has a little epiphany of sorts, even though it's not necessarily something that's obviously, so insightful. But Schiller said, but you are describing something that is not objectively real. And then Goethe, it was kind of an aha moment, though it may not be so obvious to us now. But Goethe said, then it is clear that I see my ideas with my eyes. And, Schiller and Goethe, they both reeled away with surprise and delight. For Goethe to realize that here was someone with whom he could share his imaginative conceptions of nature, and someone who would also understand that it is clear that I see my ideas with my eyes. And how can that be? And so the exploration of that paradox brings us into the world of the cycles and the poetic concepts. And for Schiller realized that the nature of their conversation was such that it inspired him with the understanding that when the human attention faculty is arrested by what it sees of beauty and some kind of external formal structure, whether it be in experience or in realization, to appreciate the form of such a structure is nourishment for the moral imagination. And as such, in asking the question, what is the meaningful human activity in the wake of the destruction of the French Revolution, as well as the destroyed idealism of the French Revolution? What is the way to bring out the original qualities of the human being, which we have come to respect in a new way, with the positive side of the philosophical ideologies that inspired the French Revolution. We have come to see the purpose and the value of human free thought, among many other things, in a new way. It's been brought and made clear to us, and it has inspired us. So let's storm the Bastille. Well, that's a little bit of a jump there. It's a little bit of a gap, and there's a little bit. That's where the education needs to be. And so this is what Schiller was responding to in this conversation that they had. And then at some point, Schiller began to put out a periodical, a magazine called Der Horen. I do not know how to pronounce it, with the correct Prussian accent, the correct Weimar accent. But it means the hours. But we know that it means the hooray, if I'm pronouncing it in the Greek way, the ancient Greek way, for the hours. You see, the hours are goddesses. The original hours are Eunomia, the goddess of good conduct and rightful moral exchange, and also good law, eunomia. It's all in that name, all in that word, eunomia. It also means good pastures, good pastures. Eu means good. Nomia means pasture, but it also means nomos, which is law. Good law, good pasture, sustenance and nourishment. And then there is Dike. And Dike is the god of justice. But we don't have the scales, and we don't have the blindfold. We could, but with Dike, as I conceive of her, they would merely be saying something. They would be symbolic props, you see, because Dike's sense of judgment is judgment. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Judgment. The word justice has come to mean so much more than it does in the specific ways that it is used. That sometimes it's good to just like take swipe that word from the chalkboard and have judgment instead, and then understand judgment, and then think, well, now, surely we are not to be judgmental, or surely judgmentalness is a fault. But righteous judgment, is not self-righteousness, but to even use a word like righteous judgment, I am kind of like suggesting it understood, it's an act of faith to kind of, to make the bridge between what I'm trying to say is righteous judgment. I know this. And so, I just bring it up to that point. I don't want to say too much, but this is the domain of Dike. This is Dike. Remember, they're hours too. You see, they are time. They are goddesses, yet as goddesses, they are manifestations of the periodicity of time, to everything its season. Turn, turn, turn. It is the hours who are the goddesses who teach this, if we're learning mythically from them, learning imaginatively from them. Eunomia, Dike, and Irene. Irene is peace. Irene, she's got some symbols that I must mention, and they are the cornucopia, and they are the scepter, and they are the torch, but not to burn, And these are the hours. And so it's fruitful that Schilling calls his periodical the Hours, basically. And it is in this periodical that Goethe publishes his Conversations with German Immigrants, in which the seventh tale that is told in this frame story of the aristocrats, broken down and on the road, having lost everything. It is the seventh story, which is told by an old parson, and it's the parson's turn to tell the tale. And he says, "This will remind you of everything and nothing." And then that old parson proceeds to tell the tale of the the green snake and the beautiful lily, and it's the parson who describes, and believe it or not, folks, You can imagine it this way, because it certainly was. It was a dark and stormy night. And an ancient ferry boatman was asleep in his shack by the side of the river. And on one side of the river, it was the land of supersensible reality. On one side of the river, it is that world that we become aware of when we cease to be beguiled by the mental thoughts that restrict us to the world of sense and the world of instinct and the world of personality, even as we have conceived of it. When we cease to be restricted to those thoughts, we become aware of this world of supersensible reality. And this is where it's a good place, if you're a ferry boatman, to pitch your hut. Because, this is where the ferry boatman lived, and he took people from the world of the supersensible to the everyday world, the world of experience. The world of realization is the supersensible world, and the world of experience is the everyday world. The ferry boatman ferried people into the world of experience. But one dark and stormy night, he was asleep after the toils of the day, and he was visited in the night by two will-o'-the-wisps. And they came like whistling and rasping in their unknown strange language. And because it was nighttime, this is when they're so bright. And this is when they can be seen, when it's night. And there was like a vague kind of flashing, a softened kind of flashing, nothing like the flash made by any kind of human invention, actually. A different kind of flickering. And these were the will-o'-the-wisps, and they came to the old ferry boatman's cabin, and they woke him up. The old ferry boatman woke up, and, "Do you desire passage across the river?" And the will-o'-the-wisp, they muttered together, or they rasped and whistled together, they hissed together, they whiffled together, and then they spoke to him in his own language. "Yes, we would." And they were like standing before him. They were not like flames. It's important to see them. And it is important to not see them, because in seeing them, you see them, and in seeing them, you do not see them. But there they are, and they want to go across the river. You're the ferry boatman, so you will take them. Get into the boat. They get into the boat. The ferry boatman goes to work, pushing the pole across this river, and they're going to the other side. And as they're going along, these will-o'-the-wisp, they seem to be... they just do what they want to do, and you just can't stop them. And they're moving all around, they're dancing all around, and they're actually beginning to rock the boat. And he's the ferry boatman, he's got to say who's in charge now. And he says to them, "If you do not cease, the boat will tip over, stop." And actually they did a little bit. Well, they did enough to where he was okay with it until they got to the other side, and then they stepped off. And they were about to just go when the ferry boatman said, "Stop, you haven't paid me." And they turned around and they shook themselves, and from these will-o'-the-wisps shaking themselves, gold coins fell onto the riverbank and bounced and rolled downhill, perhaps toward the water. The ferry boatman leaped out of the boat and said, "Stop, stop. If any of the gold gets into the river, it will boil over and overflow. Stop your gold. It cannot go into the river." And what did the will-o'-the-wisp do? They say, "If you will not have any gold, then we will be on our way." And they turned to go once again, or so they thought. They found themselves bound to that very spot. They could not go. The ferry boatman, I suppose, has powers of his own, or maybe something is to the effect of their original nature that still is operating according to the ways that they actually need to be for the needs of the story, and they stop under the power of the ferry boatman, maybe. Probably, I think. And, "Let us go," they cried out. "Let us go. I will not let you go until you pay me. If you don't take gold, you'll take nothing." And they laughed about that. They thought that was pretty funny. The ferry boatman says, "Do you not know? I am only to be paid in fruits of the earth." Fruits of the earth? Fruits of the earth? We are wheels of the wisp. We have nothing to do with fruits of the earth. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fruits of the earth. You must pay me in 3 good cabbages, 3 large onions, and 3 good artichokes. In 3 cabbages, 3 onions, and 3 artichokes shall you pay me. I only take payment of that nature. You don't pay me, you do not go. And then it was the ferry boatman's turn to go. But the Will of the Wisp cried, no, please, we will pay you. We promise we will pay you. And he said to them, your word is your bond by this river and by my voice. And they went away. He let them go because they were duly bound to see to it in whatever way that the ferry boatman be paid. Meanwhile, the ferry boatman, he had to take care of all this gold scattered across the ground, perilously close to the river. Thank goodness none of the gold had fallen into the river, because indeed it would have been as he said, but it did not. He wanted to make sure that it continued not to do so. So he reached down, he picked up the gold coins, he gathered them together, and he put them in his hat. And then so that the gold coins would never roll into the river again, he carried his hat full of gold coins shaken out by the wills of the wisps. He carried it to a nearby cliff, a ferny, rocky cliff with fissures and cracks and clefts. And into one particularly spacious cleft, perhaps the entrance to a cave, he overturned his hat, and the gold coins fell down into this cleft in the rock. And when he was done, he put his hat back on and got ready to go back home and rest, a well-deserved one. But inside the cave, there was the green snake. And the green snake was inside the cave, and the coins fell down all around her like a shower from heaven. She did not feel their heaviness. The clinking that they made was like some kind of strange and joyful music that she felt in the way that snakes feel through the vibrations. Hearing is a kind of a vibration. But for a snake, the hearing is a different way. And the hearing was a certain kind of music that made her realize the time had come to open her mouth and take in the coins that were falling, the manna from heaven to receive. And so, yes, the tale tells us this. She ate the gold coins. As soon as they were inside, they changed into light, pure golden light that suffused her from the inside, so that she was filled with a sense of understanding that something that happened that was meant to have happened, that something had happened in its due succession of time, that the hours had given their bounty in a balanced way, and now she was glowing with a light of her own, brought about by the golden coins that she had eaten. So she slithered out of the cleft and began to slither along the ground, and was seeing everything lit by the light that came from her. Every leaf, every particle, every stone shone like an emerald, glowing in this golden, greenish, life-giving, celestial yet earthy kind of light. And she was overjoyed, and she sought the source, actually, outside of the place where she was, to find out where this had come from that had brought this about. And so she was searching, and she was looking. Oh, yes, the snake was looking in a way that she had never looked before, lifting her head up off the ground and peering over the weeds and things and the reeds and the water plants and the boggy swamps, because that's where she was going. She was used to rocky hillsides and drier places, and the vegetation that she normally ate came from those kind of places. But now all that was forgotten, because she was plowing her way, so to speak, and slithering around reeds and sedge and mud and bogs and all kinds of caked earth in the swamp she was, and peering up above the tall vegetation to see, because she was seeing a light from a distance, you see. She was seeing the will o' the wisps. This is where we see will o' the wisps, isn't it? In swamps. And so she was following them through a swamp. Though the going was tough, she paid it no mind. And she did catch up with them. And the wills of the wisp, they turned around and they saw her. Do you know what they said? These wills of the wisp. Oh, our horizontal cousin. Oh, our horizontal cousin. We are two of the vertical lot. We are superior, but what of it? watch what we can do. And then they began to show off. They elongated themselves and made themselves highly vertical, like shooting up into the sky, like tapered candle flames, exaggerated to the point of like a comic strip or something. They were doing this, and then they came back down because they didn't want to overextend themselves. Ha. They didn't want to do that. And so, we are this, whereas you, cousin, you must be horizontal to the ground. And they kind of twittered and laughed in their whistling and raspy way. And the snake, indeed, she felt it was getting harder and harder to lift her head up so high. She wasn't used to moving that way. Plus, she had moved in such a way for so long anyway to catch up with them. So she was realizing it, and then she was reminded of that, and yet they were reminding her of it in a way that she'd never been reminded before, because she knew that they were related. There was a likeness between them, though they were vertical and she was horizontal. And it seems to be that she was saying something came over me, and when I say that, I don't mean it in the normal sense. I mean like something came over me like from above, and came down upon me, and it was like something long foretold. The time had come, and I brought the gold into myself, and it made me glow like this, and I wondered, where did it come from? So I looked and looked to find where it was, to get closer to it. I see it as you two. You are the sources of it. Indeed we are, they said, and as if in a kind of a giggle fit, they shimmered, and the golden coins cascaded down again. And then she went over to them and, gulped down some number of them and began to glow with a great fullness, which, she knew this was the satisfying way to be. And so she expressed her gratitude to them. Thank you. You have given me something that I've long wanted, and now I am assured that I will have this supply. Because of the nature of it, I feel it changing me from within, educating my awareness of it, even as it is happening, she says to them. And in return, what would you want me to do? Well, I will do anything. And so they, the two wills of the wisps, they said to the green snake, take us to the beautiful lily. Take us to the beautiful lily. And then they rasped and whispered together in great glee and excitement and perhaps anticipation. And she said, the beautiful lily. She knew exactly what they were talking about. Take you to the beautiful lily. The thing is, she's on the other side of the river, said the snake, the green snake, to the two wills of the wisps. And the wills of the wisps said, we just came from over there. We paid the nice ferryman to take us across, and he seemed to get upset with us, but what of it, it doesn't matter to us. We are wills of the wisp, but we're on this side. We're looking for the green lily, for the beautiful lily on this side of this land, the land of experience. And she said, no, she's on the other side. Well, then we got to go to the ferry boatman and have him take us back. And before they'd even thought about his payment of cabbages, artichokes, and onions, the green snake said, he can't do that. There's rules here about that. He can take you here, but he cannot take you back over there. And the wills of the wisps, they said, dreadful anguish! Oh, dreadful anguish! How will we see the beautiful lily? And she said, well, actually, I can take you across tomorrow at noon. And the wills of the wisp said, that is a time we do not travel. We do not go out in daylight. We cannot be seen in daylight. We do not travel in daylight. And we are not seen in daylight. We are not there in daylight. We're not around. And she said, but then you have only the recourse to be carried across by the giant. Oh, they said, where's the giant who will carry us across? It's not exactly like the giant carries you across, said the green snake. The giant's shadow carries you across. The giant's shadow carries you back across the river. And you go to such and such a place where the vegetation overhangs the banks. And you go there in the morning or the evening, of course, because that is when his shadow, already long, is at the longest. And that is when you can be conveyed across on his shadow. And so the wills of the wisp, they eagerly went on their way, lickety-split, you might say. And meanwhile, the green snake, she had a will and a mind and a desire of her own. She wanted to get away from those wills of the wisps because she felt as if her light was integral of itself and needed to be kept and nourished to be that way. And also there was something she wanted to see that she had never seen before, which she would see by virtue of this light when she got there. And so she came to a cleft. She returned to her home. She came to a cleft in the rock. And she slithered up the rocky face of the cliffside and into her original domain she stole. But now she was glowing with a light by which she could see, for the first time, the place where she had always lived. And now, before she had come across strange things that she could feel with her scales. She could also sense, the vibrations. She could flick her tongue and understand, the subtle way that snakes perceive the world through their sensitive and forked tongues. The lesson that is there for humans to be taught is inexhaustible. Of course, it's in the course of things. But there were things that she still couldn't put together in her mind. But now she could, because she had a light that came out of her. So she had before felt rough and bristly things that seemed to her, the scales, intuitively like they were silver or something. She had sometimes actually brought into the daylight, where she could see, she had brought, that had clung to her scales, jewels. Jewels of various kinds. And she, what did I slither through in the darkness to bring to what I see in the light now? I wonder what that could be. Well, now she could see what it was. She had even also, though, come across shapes of a strange workmanship, shapes of a strange workmanship of smooth stone. Were they marble or something else? Smooth stone shaped with regular, rectangular, measured kind of features, measured in a way that things are not measured in that way in nature, not in that way exactly, no, more in like this kind of, symmetry of a certain kind that could only perhaps be human-made. And now the snake could see with her own eyes, to see all this place, all these strange things, these strange signs, all at once, and put them together into one image in her mind through this faculty of sight, which, of sight, of light, perhaps I should say, actually, this faculty of light through which sight could create, from its original self, from its original being, from the world's original being, an original vision and being of the world, of what was really there, by way of a faculty which emerges from in here. You see, this is what she was after, a good thing to be after, I would think. And now she could finally see. So into the cave she went, and lo and behold, there she was, inside of a temple, a subterranean temple, inhabited, she thought only by her, but actually inhabited by her and some other forms, living forms, statues, human-made statues, or statues in the image of humans. Statues, the first one she saw was gold. It was a gold statue. It was a gold statue of a king. And it was large, but there was some understanding that the snake's perception gave her, that though the sculpture was large, the human that it showed was actually a small human. And it was that kind of a statue, you see, speaking, in that way, Uncanny, but there it was, before her eyes. So, and that one was wearing an oaken mantle, not laurel leaves, but oaken, the story tells us, made of oak. And then next to it, she saw, like it was like emerging from the darkness. She saw all of it kind of at once. The golden statue. Then she saw the silver statue. The silver statue was decked out. Actually, had a fine cape and a sword and a fine crown, and was actually dressed to the nines, so to speak. And then next to it was the brass statue. The brass statue had a heavy club. The brass statue was, made to express a certain kind of stolid will. This was the brass statue. And she saw another statue. It was hard to make out. Not only was it hard to see, but in and of itself, in its own being, it was kind of like, it seemed put together from other things. And you could see that it was a put together thing. resembling a whole thing, but only in certain ways. All this at once, she saw in a much quicker, time than it takes to describe it. And then there seemed to be like what could only be described as a crack in the wall. But actually, I'm not sure. It might have been a customary kind of opening that appeared as it was needed for passage by the one who came through it, which was the old man and his lantern. The old man and his lantern came in then. And the old man and his lantern came in, and he was a human being, a living one, no statue. And but the lantern was something else, because it was like it gave this light, and the snake gave her light. And in the light of the lantern, the light of the snake became clearer, and yet the light of the lantern was also kind of an ever-increasing clarity of itself. And now this is what she saw before her, in one instant, in one, then it takes, and of course it's laborious to describe it. This is why folk tales of this nature are literary, you might say, because this is the nature of medium, of language in this time and in this place and at this time, in this hour, at this propitious time, you see, in its not chronos sense, but its kairos sense. So that's another thing that you have to say about nonlinear, chronos, and God bless Chronos. Chronos did what Chronos had to do, and without Chronos having done the good and the bad he did, there wouldn't be anything that came after that, But Kairos is the moments in their succession, the God-given hours, you see, operating in the way that they operate. The goodness of law, the righteous judgment, and the justice, and, the pasturage, and of the hours in their proper way, all of these ways. All this embodied, in this old man who came in, an actual human being, and of course, that's when the king spoke, and the snake was there to hear it all, Oh, and I'm not going to tell you the specifics of everything that takes place in that story, because it is within the keeping, actually, of what I'm doing, here now in this little kind of like foray. It's in the keeping of it to kind of like see of it what seems to give us, what seems good, to try and understand now. Well, actually, which is for me to say that there was something that perhaps I should have said that I did not say, but thank goodness now I can say it. And that is that the statue spoke to the green snake. And this is what I want to say. And the story, the dialogue in the story, of all the characters in the story, and I'm going to come back to my original point here, hopefully, but I want to say that generally the dialogue and all the characters of the story, and I've only mentioned a few, and I will only mention a few in this evening because we haven't got time, for the entirety of the story, because it is a long one, especially when you think of it as like in the model of a folk story, but it's actually not, but in the way that people have become accustomed to reading things in this way and thinking about them, in a certain way, it's like that. So I can only just kind of give you the little paraphrase type things, but the dialogue consists of questions and answers, and this is very important as a form. And also, though, it goes farther than that many times also. I mean, there's sophisticated and extensive dialogue, and there's also philosophical and kind of like legal discourse and moral discourse spoken by these characters. And I say characters because they're human characters. They're representations or images, not representations in the linear sense, but images, of energies in the thought of the soul. This is the world that Goethe and Schiller understood in each other. They kind of inspired each other, and as this is often the case in all these communities. I mean, we talk about Goethe and Schiller. We talk about Gary Snyder and Lou Welch. I mean, we might as well mention that also. There is this notion that the dialogue between the characters is this kind of taking place in this kind of like transformational kind of like realm of perception. Anyway, the golden statue asks a question to the green snake. The golden statue says, from where do you come? And the green snake, I come from the cleft in the rock. And what is more precious than gold? And the green snake says, light is more precious than gold. And the golden statue says, what is more refreshing than light? And the green snake says, speech. Speech is more refreshing than light. And light is more refreshing than gold. So, and all this happens in one moment, in one instant of the story as it proceeds, And so this is how we have to understand, how to read a story like this. And when, like I can talk about linear, nonlinear, and the restrictive ways these kind of, polarities become dichotomies in the way that they are restrictedly understood. I can talk about that kind of thing. But I can also tell you, this is what's happening now. It's like we have to have a big loom to spin a thin strand of wool. And what that is a metaphor for the reading comprehension sense muscle that is educated, exercised when we work in the fields of those forms of literature such as Goethe and Schiller together created, and the form it took in the magazine called The Hours, and the form it took in the book of the Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily, you see. And so, that being said, let us see how things are going here. Okay, that's okay. I'm going to continue on just a bit here. I'm glad I checked my watch, though, because the time is at hand. I mentioned that a little bit, didn't I? When the green snake, the time was at hand. So it was her destiny, but that's a little bit conventional of a way to describe it, actually. It was the right thing for her to do. It was the kairos. It was the moment. The time is at hand. That means there is the awareness of time as kairos, and there is the awareness of time as evoked in the title of the periodical that the journal, which means journey, that Schiller put out called The Hours, in which appeared, the tale amidst the other tales of which is the green snake and the beautiful lily, because it's about a sense of a notion of fulfillment, I guess you might say, a motion of fulfillment in the open of what was hidden before. When the golden statue asks a question of the old man with the lantern, he asks something about what is the secrets. No, actually, it was a question of quantity. I believe the gold statue asked from the start, a question of quantity. How many secrets do you know? And the old man with the lantern said, 3. Which is the most precious? Asked the silver statue. The old man said, the open one, the manifest, the one you can see in plain sight. But it's still, for some reason, is secret. That's the amplification. That's me saying that. The characters don't speak in that way, of course. The open one. And then, of course, the practical brass statue says, wilt thou open it to us as well? And the old man with the lantern said, when I know the 4th. And the green snake has been there this whole time. She's observed. She's lived there. She's seen them in the darkness. She's seen them in the light. And she knows. She's already acted on that knowledge. And now she tells the old man with the lantern. She tells him, she whispers in his ear, the time is at hand. And they both reel away. The snake goes to the east, and the man with the lantern goes to the west. And he cleaves his way through the rock by virtue of his lantern. Because when his light is by itself, the light can penetrate stone for him to pass through and yet fill the passages behind him with gold. The light can turn wood into precious silver. The light can turn something, changing, transformational, some kind of transformational quality. Oh yeah, I think it's actually the light can turn decayed matter into precious stone. That's how the light, that's the nature of that light. Oh, but when it's with another light, then its magical quality kind of like transcends itself, as well magic should do. And the light, when it's with another light, anywhere else there's a light, like the light coming from the green snake. When that light is with that light, when the old man's lamp light is with the light from the green snake or any other light, including sunlight and also moonlight, it simply casts a light of its own nature, which is so wholly of its own nature that it participates in the world in this particularly, splendidly beneficial way, beautiful and good, And so it's magical in one sense and simply good in another sense. So it's beautiful and yet it's also good. And when we say good, we're not saying necessarily useful, though it is, but its use is only one aspect of the beneficial nature of it. And when we say it's, dazzling and all this, that only means as much as it needs to be to do or be what it really is, So that's kind of like that. And so it's that kind of like, statement, you could say of this kind of like, visionary speech. And it's fitting and good and actually an open secret and very common that in the mythology of the world and in the folktales of the world, the secret there is open because these are creations of the original vision language, the original faculty by which people became originally, by which they learned of such things as wisdom and beauty and truth and goodness and faithfulness and courage and endurance, and insight and inspiration and intuition. All of these things came to be the beneficial inheritance from the cosmos to human beings through the form of, pictorial and mythical speech. And this is what gives the language arts their artfulness with everything that conveys. And so it's particularly possible to visit it and to think about it and to look at it in the realm of this story now. So we have to say that Goethe, in his thoughts, he felt the need, which was fulfilled, to exercise the gift the cosmos had given him through his poetic instinct and intellect, and soulful valuing. There were many, many kind of ways and forms and genres in which Goethe worked. And what enabled that, though, is a quality that we can see really clearly in the folktale, you might say, of the green snake and the beautiful lily. And that is this notion, this inkling that the cycles and the scales of value and energy manifest in the world, in a particular and characteristic way, which can be noticed, which can be tracked, which can be attended to. And so this gives, this reawakens the sense of the necessity of the poetic in education, because it is the galleon, it is the treasure ship that comes to the shore of our imagination from Goethe, this bountiful thing that has come here as if from another dimension of thought, from the mind of Goethe, and then what Goethe's mind was in touch with, So Goethe as an observer of the natural world. And when I say natural, I mean the world we see with our eyes, but that's only the outer layer of it, It's still like the natural world, and then it changes, and it has the principle of change within itself. And Goethe like put it in this kind of like three-part kind of teaching, I think, which is kind of maybe something to like put it all together with. Goethe spoke of reality as consisting of metamorphosis, metamorphosis of metamorphosis of, well, of including like mutability and all of this, of metamorphosis of, well, I guess you could say he called it fulfillment, of metamorphosis and of fulfillment. Now, but there's a third one which is so important. I'm going to have to like peek into my book here to look at it because it's something that I want to like go into, because it has to do with a description of his powerful sense of observation. And of course it's this, of course it skipped from my mind as these things do. And there's a lesson in that, I know, and I'll keep on learning it. But it's metamorphosis, it's polarity. That was the one that didn't appear to me at first. It is metamorphosis, it is polarity, and then it is enhancement. Metamorphosis, polarity, and enhancement. So we've kind of like touched on some of that in a little bit in a certain way. I want to say that as far as metamorphosis goes, I want to mention that in light of some of the things, that we've learned having to do with like the connectivity, the succession of the hours, the name of the journal of Schiller's, the hours, the fortunate moments, time working together, the moments in harmony with themselves, bestowing a bounty that can only be described by, a myth of divinity, like in a goddess. Goddess is named after the hours. There's that kind of thing, that I want to say. And then there is polarity. And polarity has to do, one example is the cycles. Polarity is things change into other things in these moments of succession in time, as this, it's a line, it's a chain, it's an energy, it's a transformation of things into what they become. And as they do this, there are certain patterns that are expressed and conveyed in terms of polarities, you see. Things that are parts of each other somehow, and yet are in various forms of opposition sometimes, and in interrelationship together. A world of interrelationship is described as a world of polarity. So there is polarity. And then there's this important thing about Goethe, which makes him a liberal humanist, and which makes him many things, which makes him... one who is aware of the life-givingness of the transformational quality existing on the vertical level, the transformational quality, the mutability and the polarity of morality and imagination and growth and formation of the human spirit. And this is enhancement. This is what Goethe calls enhancement. It gives us a new sense of what enhancement could be, but be careful with that understanding of what enhancement can be, because it's there for us to learn from, and that's what we do. But it also means like fulfillment. I wonder if that might be a certain way that we want to emphasize about fulfillment of these, of this human desire, this human need, this human instinct, and this human ability to become aware of those realms of value and understanding that are such that they show themselves to the human being as something good, and the time is at hand. So I want to say that there's two things I want to mention that are seemingly coincidental, but I just want to add this because this also gives us a sense of an expression of the sense of time that is important to convey at this moment. And that is that Goethe's birthday was August 28th, just a couple of days ago. But I also want to say, in honor of the title of Schiller's journal, the hours and the goddesses of the hours, that the sense that the time is at hand, and the kairos, and the propitiousness, of creative expression in the form and stream of time. I want to say a further indication of that actually is the issue of the hours that was published, in which appeared the story of the green snake and the beautiful lily, was issued at Michaelmas, which is, a religious holiday, but it's also a mythic holiday now. It's a mythic denotation of a certain cycle of time. It marks the time when Saint Michael, the archangel, defeated Satan in the war in heaven, and Satan fell to the earth. And they say he landed in a blackberry bush, and he cursed the blackberry bush. And so there's a certain kind of thing where people do not pick blackberries after Michaelmas. But nevertheless, I want to say, it was at Michaelmas that was the time when Goethe's literary work, which we have explored this evening, appeared in the world. And, well, what can you say? I didn't know it would be this way, but yesterday was Michaelmas. And so we are in that particular kind of cycle of time where the time is at hand for these kind of creative literary expressions. And so let it be, let it take the shape that it does. Let it be brought forth well in you and in me. Another thing that Goethe taught, and he learned from his powers of observation, and he learned it from other teachers of his, Winckelmann. Some say Winckelmann is the father of archaeology, but Winkel and Goethe and Schiller too, they say, let the artwork speak to you. When the artwork speaks to you, when you're truly listening, with everything that means, and that's a lifelong task, to learn to listen. But when you're listening in the presence of the artwork will tell you something that has never been said before and will never be said again. And what the artwork tells you will be something creative that will go on in the cycles. And so let us learn about the cycles. It's all in the cycles. And the cycles, it's all been forgot. But that's an exaggeration. We can give Lou Welch, poetic license in saying that. It's a beautiful way to say it, too. I love it when things are not grammatical. You meet him alive as you or me, just like the folk song Joe Hill. That poem is, I want to bring that to mind again. But in honor of the cycles, and in honor of the propitious time, in honor of good fortune, and in honor of, beauty and truth, let us, commit this thought to the nourishment of our spiritual imaginations, as well as the entertainment of us, because it's entertaining. Otherwise, it couldn't hold our attention. If it does, and hopefully it does. And hope is all about that sense of time, isn't it? Anyway, so this is my story. This is my song. This is my message. And I thank you for your heroic listening. And so I say unto thee, so long for now.